So, ladies and gentlemen, this is the one and only Dustin Pittman. So, Dustin and I were quite a team for many years. Dustin was my main and only photographer of record for everything I was doing from what years?
79 started, 79, 78, 78, 79, 80, then a lot.
Yeah.
80, 81,
80s,
so 83.
80, like into mid 80s, I would say.
Yeah.
And so we had a lot of adventures. We took pictures just about everywhere.
Yeah.
And it was a different time, different place. And we were in every great, pretty, grimy, grungy, happy, fun place. And we would go with a bunch of girls and dress them up. And Dustin would hang from things, would do all kinds of whatever. And we had a great time and we had really fantastic photos. And I am honored that he's chosen some of them for his amazing book. And it's my pleasure to show you this right at the beginning because we're going to talk about what's in the book and what Dustin Pittman is all about. And this book is a real treasure. If you love New York and you want to see New York through the years up until today, because he's still clicking away and catching every fabulous thing that happens in this city. So welcome, my dear friend, to my podcast.
Thank you, Noah. It's definitely an honor. Definitely an honor. I am blessed. And I just want to say my book, Dustin Pittman's New York After Dark, is a dance of life. And it's all about the dance, the body language of dance. Not just disco dancing and dancing, but the body language, the way we place things and the way things are.
Yeah. And I think the fun thing about your photographs, especially you have such an affinity to music and the musicians and the singers and the people who entertain us and your synergy with them. They get close to you right away and they trust you, and the photos are just spectacular. I think the best photo I've ever seen is that photo in your book of Keith Richards. I mean, it is beautiful. It's spectacular. So if anybody's a fan of great music, you see all the key players that have ever performed in New York in your book. So it's just fantastic. My question to you is, when did you decide that photography was going to be what you did?
Well, it's really, magical because I kind of grew up with it. I started at 6 years old at the boys' club in a photography class, and they taught us how to develop print and critique our images of all my friends, aunts and uncles, cows, animals, because I grew up on a farm in upstate New York, in Adirondack Mountains. And my grandfather and my aunt dabbled and were photographers. So, that's the kind of energy and the kind of DNA I came from.
Yeah, so you were surrounded by it. And you're such a social person. You're such a people person that the camera is the perfect assistant for you because it just engages you anywhere you go. And all you need is a door to open and the camera opens the door, and then you're a part of what's happening. You're not just a photographer, you are a participant in what is happening, including the photographs you're taking. So when we worked together, you were such an important participant, not just the camera and your photos, but your energy and your sense of humor. And I mean, I think we laughed most of the time We would laugh so hard we were crying most of the time. So having fun is so much a key. And you have fun every day. You leave the house and it's like, I'm going to have a good time today. I'm going to make this work. So how do you muster that up?
Well, back to what you said, the camera's a tool for me, but it's about being in relationship with whoever I'm with. So what I like to, for myself, I seek out new, fresh,
right.
And also I want to be in relationship with people. And, what kind of works for me is whether I'm shooting musician or I'm shooting fashion designer or I'm shooting, a protest, whatever it is, a march or whatever it is, it's passionate for me. It's my passion. It's what I believe in. And that's what's important to me,
So when you're taking photographs today, because I know you're everywhere. I mean, you are everywhere, and you're actively involved in even this moment of what's going on. New York is always an extraordinary place, and you've seen New York through the decades. What do you see now in New York? What do you think is the story that your camera is picking up, is telling through your photos?
Well, for me, I feel, New York, the reason why I call it New York, it's new. And so for me, it's all about acceptance, coming into the new part of New York. And when I see now in New York City, which is really incredible, I think it's fascinating and very positive, is the fact is that people are getting back into relationships. And that looks like small clubs, small, different places to have dinners, to have dinners at home, dinners in small cafes. Their people are starting to be in relationship, putting down their phones and starting having conversations. And, in real time and real relationships. It's really wonderful like that. So that's what I see about New York. It's like, it's almost like, not that we're trying to duplicate the 60s and 70s, which, we're all in relationship with no technology and cell phones.
Right.
But you know what? I think people are starting to realize that a one-on-one or in relationship with friends is more important than swiping left.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or right.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree with you. I think the touching, like just people touching each other and feeling close, may be a reaction to the aftermath of COVID, where we're getting further away from it and it's okay, and we can feel like we can embrace and touch each other and be more intimate. But I think you're right. I wasn't thinking that. I thought you were going to say something else, but it is true. There are more of these more intimate places to have dinner. People are joining membership clubs and wanting to be part of a little group and a little kind of thing that's going on at a place that people connect to each other. We were talking about how Central Park was our everything, right?
Oh,
I mean,
incredible.
Talk about Central Park and what was happening there.
Well, I like to, as 67, the beginning of Summer of Love, until unfortunately 80, the AIDS epidemic, was the whole Summer of Love period.
Yeah.
So in 60, 68, 69, for me, 68, 69, and then on, and weekends, we'd go to Central Park. We'd go to Bethesda Fountain in Central Park, beautiful fountains, very spiritual.
Yeah.
And then there'd be a cafe there serving sangria, and everybody would dress up in their peacock fashions. And it's not what you wore. It wasn't Balenciaga. It's how you wore it.
Right.
And that's what was nice about it, because everybody wore it differently.
Yeah.
Everybody had their own personality, their own identity, and they owned it.
Yeah.
And they lived it and they walked it. And it was incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, it was really incredible. It was real.
Yeah, and beautiful. I remember wearing velvet evening gowns to Central Park, right? On Sundays, especially, we would dress up, put on, just like dress and have a good time. But we would go into Central Park. We'd bring our dogs. People would bring wine and guitars, and we'd all sit and just like hang out on top of each other. But everybody looked amazing. And it wasn't competitive. It was such an appreciation for what each person was wearing. And nobody would ever want to look like somebody else. I mean, that would be the worst thing, that you and somebody else looked the same. It was all about the individual, like you said, of just being your own spirit, having your own style. No stylist, nobody helping you. You just sort of created your own image, your own star, right? And it was really, really special.
And like you said, no stylist, no paparazzi, no bodyguards,
right?
No PR. It was all like everybody was doing their thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it was all these different, like, incredible communal tribes that weren't competitive. And that was great about the times, because people weren't afraid of people stealing their ideas or mind, because there was so much energy in the air, in the universe, that there was so many ideas going around there, that you didn't have to worry about it stealing one idea, because you had many in your head.
Yeah, there were ideas everywhere, and everybody was helping each other with their ideas.
Yes.
I mean, I remember Bob Curry?
Of course.
Do you remember? So Bob Curry was one of my closest, dearest friends, and he would do Bendel's windows. And so there would be like 15 of us helping him do the windows. And we would have music blaring and singing and dancing, and we'd be all night doing the Bendel's interior and windows with him. And everybody was doing things like that.
Yeah.
And you were taking pictures. And the truth is, if you weren't taking pictures, there would be very little documentation of what was going on, because we didn't have cameras. We weren't taking pictures of each other. We were just experiencing each other. And you were capturing the moment, and nobody posed.
No.
Like, there's no posing in your picture.
No.
That's what I love about this book. Every picture is just that moment, that minute, that moment, and you got the full energy. You can almost smell the room. You can almost, you feel it through what was going on, and none of it was pretend or a phony shot for some make-believe thing that really wasn't happening, right? Everything was really happening that you took pictures of.
Yeah, and Norma, that's the magic for me. That was the magic. Is the fact is that, being in a relationship, like I remember those times hanging out with, Stephen Burrows and Georgia St. Angelo and Scott Berry and Fernando Sanchez and Halston and, all these people hanging around and like going to their houses or going to clubs or going to places. And many times I'd even pick up my camera, and that was respect. They respected me and I respected them. It wasn't about celebrityism.
Right.
It was about just being there and just, okay, so we'll take a picture. Okay, we'll make a film.
Right.
Okay, we'll do a music score.
Yeah, but it was more of that. It wasn't to document anything. Nobody was thinking about documenting it. It was just that moment, having it, personally documenting it, show it. Nobody, I'm sure everybody's looking at your pictures and saying, oh, wow, I remember that. That was such a great moment. And not thinking, oh, I have to have that photo so I could put it on my Instagram and show everybody what it is. Yeah. And so the fact that you were there was so important. Especially in the book, I'm sure you have like another 4 books worth of incredible photographs. So I think the idea I mean, anybody that sees this book can absolutely see what that energy was, and how you were just in this moment in time. You were there all the time, just recording it in some magical way without anybody feeling you intruded on a situation. You were so much a part of it that people just didn't even think that there was something happening that shouldn't happen, right? You were such a big part of it.
I mean, the times were, the fact is that, when I look at, when I shoot pictures now, a lot of people, you have to get people out of get in the zone and out of their zone. But, like there's a lot of people, like then people, when you photograph people or you're at a place and you're rolling with someone with no boundaries, and you're picking up a camera or a film camera or an analog camera, they're not thinking about what they're going to look like at Instagram.
Right.
They're not thinking about what they're going to look like.
Right.
So they're in the moment.
Yeah.
They're not in that moment. They're in this moment, the real moment.
And it's raw, and it's raw and
it's raw,
amazing. And just, what was probably the biggest surprise result of some photos you've taken that you look back on and say, wow, I can't believe I was there in that moment and I got this? Or what? You have many, I know.
Well,
but
Laura,
if you think,
it's a great question, because through the decades, through the decades, I noticed those moments, even like, okay, just to give you an example, I shot a lot of CBGBs and rock and roll in the early days,
right.
But then I went back and shot the rock and roll revival from 1999 to 2007, where you had the Yeah Yeah Yeahs and the Libertines and the Strokes and thousands of bands that came from all around the world to perform in New York at these small little venues like Luna Lounge and Brownies and all these places that are not here anymore.
Yeah.
So now I documented not just the band, like shoot in concert, but, I would take them outside and do the area and then also the venue.
Yeah.
And that's all gone today.
Yeah.
So, I looked even back to that, to 2007, 1990, there's a lot of different periods.
That's gone, yeah.
Just like early, like the beginning, not the beginning, because you did street fashion, but, in 2006 or 2005, you had this revival with Hood by Air and Gypsy Sport and all these, designers, beginning of Telfar and, and that was all like DIY.
Right.
Heron Preston, like all these people coming in, and I saw that and I said, oh my God, this is, And then looking back at that now, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
Telfar, it's a big deal. It's a big production, our shows, you did your show. I gotta remember your show. I got videos of all your shows. But when those shows were so special.
Yeah.
They were so personal.
Yeah.
And everybody was involved as a community.
Yes.
Including the audience.
Yes. Yes. It was friendly, and everybody was laughing much more than they do now.
Always.
Nobody's laughing anymore. There's no humor is sort of missing at this moment. If there was anything that I would really wish we could resurrect, would be laughing again and bringing that into relationships and what we do. I think some of the great things in looking through your book is like the beginnings, like you caught the beginnings of so many things. I think Madonna before she was Madonna, and you said that's Madonna before she was Madonna. And I remember that. I remember this girl that was in the city who was fresh, right? Mm-hmm. And she wasn't super popular, but she was at Max's, Kansas City, right? Yeah. She worked there, I think. And it was, you were aware that there was something about to happen with her, but you weren't sure, right? And then this energy, New York gave her permission basically to just do whatever she wanted, whatever was forbidden for her before. She was just like, do whatever you want. So New York gave permission to a lot of people to just come here and be whoever you want. Who else do you think is like a perfect example of that in New York?
Oh, there's so many.
Like
I mean,
that you can
it's
remember like seeing at that very beginning.
Yeah, I mean, there's people that just like grabbed it by the,
Yeah.
and this just like went forward, like, Debbie Harry and Blondie with, I have the book in there with the stilettos before Blondie. And like, I mean, just there's so many people that were able to just believe and without the boundaries. There wasn't boundaries.
No.
And also New York, at the time, the overhead was low. So you were able to do, you were able to do an off Broadway play at La Mama or Truck and Theater Warehouse. You had Charles Ludlam, you had, Theater the Ridiculous, you had, of course, La Mama. But the thing is, you were able to do these things
because you could afford.
Because you afford it.
And people, I'm friends with Twyla Tharp, and she's her early work in New York too was very experimental, and it was like in places that you were almost free, and she created all of this art in dance that is now almost every dance troupe copies what she's done, and it's part of the staple of dance.
Yeah.
But look at also fashion. Fashion, I think, in the 70s in New York was probably the peak of fashion in New York. In my estimation, Ian Schrager feels the same way. There was a moment in time, and you have a lot of that in the book.
Tons.
And so what are your thoughts about that?
Well, you know what? Honestly, the late 60s and the middle 60s and late 60s and the 70s were incredible, period. I mean, just incredible for fashion and music and, new things. People were coming out with new things, and it was
new every day.
Yeah, every day there's something new. And it was like, you know what? People really loved what they did. It wasn't forced. It wasn't like pressured.
And it was authentic.
It was authentic. And it was like, when they went, it wasn't work.
Yeah.
Like my photographs of David Johansen did the forward of this book.
Oh my God.
So, and he says in the book, he said, well, Dustin's not really like a photographer because it's not a job. He loves what he does, and that's like you and, designers.
And the same with him too. I mean,
absolutely.
I interviewed David for my podcast, and you're a dear, dear friend of his. And it's such a loss. Somebody like that, a true original, as not one lifetime, but then he created Buster. I mean, Buster. Like, how do you do that and and have another success? It's like nothing got in his way, and he is like true blue New York. I mean, he is like the real deal, and I just that whole period of time represented authentic people who were not afraid to invent something and go with it and not feel that it could fail. Like, who cares? So what? It fails, you'll do something else, right?
Yeah, I mean, I remember when David started out, like buying these clothes at cheap thrift shops at Bogies on 10th Street, across the street from 2nd Avenue Deli, I mean, just buying this women's clothes, just putting them on and fitting them.
He would come in with the guys, and they would all literally come in. Remember Janine that worked in the red-haired girl?
Yeah, of course.
So they would come in, and she literally would put outfits together, and they would change their clothes and leave in a whole new outfit of like tight pedal pushers, and striped shirts and heels, and they looked like her. Like she dressed like that, and they were like, she was the additional party to that group. They were just the coolest. They
incredible.
were just the absolute coolest.
And you know what? These guys would play in the beginning, especially like 70. They play anywhere.
Yeah.
And they would just play. You remember Mike Quashie?
Yes. Oh my God.
You know, those, the Age of Decadence parties at the Waldorf Astoria, Diplomat Hotel, like all these crazy places, you know? And we would be there all hours of the night. Like, it's so funny today also, you mentioned about, you know, what's happening now. And, you know, there's a lot of late night parties and, you know, things going on, definitely. But I find that a lot of events are very early now. Like some of them are 6 o'clock. I said, oh my God, 6 o'clock. I remember not going out until 3 in the morning. I said, 6 o'clock. I said, I got to get ready for this thing at 6.
I know. I have to admit, I've turned into one of these early birds myself. But you're right. I mean, we would do the windows. Like you have pictures of these great pictures, but we would do the mannequins. We'd put full makeup, hair, dress them. It would be like into 4 o'clock in the morning. And then there would always be a place to go.
Yeah,
like,
go to go.
We would go either to a great breakfast place.
And they would be open.
They would
be open.
Many of them would be open.
Yes.
And it would be choices of where you could do this. But everybody knew each other. It was a smaller New York, right?
Yeah.
So there were people from different walks of life, but everybody kind of knew each other. Even if you didn't personally, you had seen them, you would say hello. And it was friendlier. It definitely wasn't a safe time in New York because there was crime, there was a lot of issues, but it had there was a protected shield in some way on New York where people would protect each other.
Exactly.
And so you always, no matter what was going on, you still felt safe. Like you could go up to anybody, help me, and they would help you. Yeah. It was just a very sort of full of spirit and generous of spirit time. I mean, I think that
No, you're
really
absolutely right. I mean, when I first moved to New York in 1968, I lived on Alphabet City, 14th Street between C and D, next to the Con Edison and Strauss stores. And my rent included gas and electric and a 3-room shotgun railroad set with pull chain toilet and the tub that you use as a table.
And in the kitchen,
right? $12.50 a month.
No.
Right? And then when I moved out after 2 years, because I got robbed, because you remember we said these window gates?
Right.
And the window gates, and then more window gates, and then more window gates. Right? And these should be bet on the shape of people getting in, right? So finally I moved out after 2 years. I called over my friend. I had this twin bed on rollers and we put all my clothes in boxes and carried it out to the middle of 14th Street at 4 in the morning, right? And wheeled it all the way up 14th Street to 8th Avenue and all the way up 8th Avenue to 21st Street.
Yeah.
And that's when I moved. You can't do that today.
No, it's not. But this was going on all the time. I mean, it was really, if you think about it, it was so laid back and so easy. Yeah. And I think non-judgmental is the magic word if you compare to
non-competitive
today.
Again.
Non-competitive, and nobody's judging you.
Right.
Nobody judged anybody.
No.
Everybody was totally accepted, no matter what you thought or believed in or how you presented yourself. That's it. You're good. That's good.
And people respect, that's exactly what it comes down to. It's the individual in relationship, extending your hand and saying hello and trust.
Yeah.
And trust and respect.
Yeah.
And loyalty.
Yeah.
And that's only it. I mean, you mentioned Twan Thorpe, I remember like in Chelsea where Robert Wilson had the School of
Yes.
Birds.
Yes.
He had the Hoffman School of Birds.
Yes.
And Robert did, The Life and Times of Sigmund Freud, Deathman Bland.
Yes.
He did all these plays at Bannon. I photographed a lot
Yeah.
of that stuff. And they would go on for 9-10 hours.
Yes.
And that's where Laurie
That's
Anderson did all Superman
That's right.
for a week. She did old Superman with the electronic. It was incredible, right? I mean,
Yeah.
so many different things that went on. And there was so much, and there was so much like DIY
Yeah.
where you just experiment and if something works, you weren't afraid
Yeah.
of taking chances.
Yeah. Yeah. And things were affordable. You could afford to make a mistake. You could afford to lose because losing didn't cost a lot. Now
Right.
there's so much at stake for everybody if they lose that they're afraid to take risks in the same way. Not everybody. There are great risk takers now, and this is probably the best time of our lives ever. What's possible right now.
Yeah.
But the simplicity of what we're talking about, I think, is something I crave just in the human spirit. I think that was so special and such an extraordinary human experience. And New York is a tough city. So if you can have that here, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, imagine that, like you were just saying, I just like add to that magical feeling of that in New York City, one of the hardest cities in the world to get along and like do things and just be able to float with your friends
Right.
and create.
Yeah. Yeah.
How beautiful that is, And like, looking forward to now and, the next day into the future, like you just shared. It's absolutely true. It's a wide open field. That's all, I feel that's all one has to do is like stay their course and believe in themselves and just follow their path.
Yeah.
Follow that path and you can't go wrong.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that you say that, and I feel that, and there are people that experience the 60s that feel that way when a lot of people who are living now are intimidated by this incredible big change that's happening. But we were weaned on change. We were weaned on the unknown and the possible, the idea of the possible. So I think you probably feel the same way I do. It's like anything is possible. And this is another time where we're lucky to be alive, to participate in anything is possible. And that the value of having that experience early in our lives gives us the ability to still be creative in a time where people are concerned about being creative, concerned about the future and what can come.
Yeah.
I think we were really lucky to have those early experiences. Who is your, from a personal point of view, what music, just walking through your music kind of history through the decades, what your personal tastes in music, how did that kind of move along?
Well, I'm sort of lucky because, I had grew up in a family of 7. So, they're all spread out in ages. So I listened to music. I remember when I was 8 years old, my family coming to New York and visiting, and they were staying somewhere around, I don't know, 34th Street, 30th Street or something in a hotel. And I remember waking up in the middle of the night. I was 7 years old, and waking up, sneaking out of the room, and running up to Joey D and the Starletters place.
Stop.
And looking in the window, the Peppermint Lounge.
Yes.
I'm right there by Times Square, and looking at the window and saying, just staring at that window and watching all these people dancing. You know?
I was in there.
Oh my God.
I was in there dancing.
But I remember those
it was
days,
great.
like doing that
Yeah.
and then sneaking back, and my parents never knew, but I remember.
And that was a tough neighborhood. That
Yeah,
was rough, and it was right off Times Square.
Yeah.
And I was there. A friend of mine in high school's father was sort of like a Jewish mafia guy, and he let us go in. We were only 16.
Yeah.
And they had a show with Joey D and the Starlighters. And then they had music or a second band. And they had in-between dancers. They had dancers, and then they had in-between dancers. And she and I were in-between dancers.
Oh my God, that's great.
At the Peppermint Lounge.
Wow.
That was
phenomenal.
Really an incredible place. But and people that would line up to get in were like, the celebrity kind of people of the, everybody.
That was one of the, I mean, there was a lot of hot clubs that we went to.
But at that time,
was amazing, I mean, just, God, I remember from the records, from the music, and then, but again, moving on to the music, like there's still different styles.
So what were your favorites? I mean, when you saw performers, or what were I know you have.
I saw so many great concerts, intimacy.
What were some of the great?
Well, Iggy
concerts?
Is one,
Iggy,
obviously. I mean, Iggy. I mean, that was the era, like 69, 70. That was the era where you had arena rock.
Yeah.
These big stadiums or these pyrotechnics, and everything was big, Jethro Tull, sitting on a park bench, right? So then all of a sudden, Iggy and Ron and Scott and James Williamson, they come from Detroit in their van, and they come to New York, stay with Danny Fields. Some of them stay with Danny Fields.
Oh my God.
And then all of a sudden, they're at Max's or they're in Gano's or they're someplace, and there's this band with Iggy there. And like, I remember just one fast thing. Like I remember going to Danny's house on 21st Street, and Iggy would crash there, and we'd get high, get stoned and get high. And then we'd walk over to Max's or go headed to Organo's at the time. These were shot. The thing is, and Iggy had one rule. This is what I heard anyway, but Iggy had one rule. If a photographer got too close to Iggy's camera, Iggy would break the camera.
Oh.
So one day, and I don't know if Iggy remembers this, and I love Iggy, incredible legend. But anyway, he said to me when we were stoned at Danny's house, he said, Dustin, he said, he called me Dusty. You remember he called me Dusty, right? He goes, Dusty, I want to tell you one thing. You can get as close as you want, and I won't break your camera.
Oh.
And I go, oh, thanks, Iggy. So some of the pictures are really close.
Close, I saw. I was thinking
really
when you said that.
But, I mean, that's, the bands, I mean, at that time, like, that's why I don't really like, I don't knock it. I mean, these bands with Lollapalooza and, Burning Man and, these different big festivals. Yeah. But you have to understand, at those times when I was at Woodstock, working at Woodstock, the stage wasn't 18 feet high. You didn't have 10, 12 stages.
Right, no.
And not only that, when you went backstage, the performers are sitting at picnic tables, smoking joints and doing acid or doing quaaludes or whatever it was.
Right.
And it was so easy there. And then now you go backstage and there's all these RVs. The performers sit in the RVs and then they come out on stage. And then when you go on stage, if you're a photographer, right? And then you got all these armbands and all these bracelets and everything to get on stage. So when you get on stage, they're still 50 miles away because the stage is so big.
Yeah, that's so true.
So, I mean, it all depends, I'm not knocking it. It's great performances and great shows.
It is more.
It's not the intimacy anymore,
no. And there is something, I watched the Scorsese Rolling Thunder, the tour with Dylan. And I mean, there was that intimacy there too, where it was very, very close, very right in your face, and the performers were close. It was everything was tied together.
It was
That,
like 60,
yeah,
it's like 60, 69 was the era,
Yeah.
era of the pop festival.
Yeah.
You had the Atlantic City Pop Festival. You had the Newport Jazz Festival Pop
That's
Festival.
right.
Led Zeppelin played the
That's
first
right.
time.
Oh my
You had the
God.
Dallas Pop Festival. You had Woodstock. You had all these pop festivals. Right
Yeah.
after. But the thing is, like I remember at the Dallas Festival walking in the through the and running into Janis Joplin.
Yeah.
Yeah. with a bottle of Southern Comfort. Come with me. Come with me.
I know. Oh, she was so amazing.
I mean, it was so amazing. I
Yeah.
remember like at Dallas, it was so, you talk about like being in a relationship with people. I remember at the Dallas Pub, as big as it was, running into Todd Rundgren when he was in Nas, when he did Hello, It's Me, that song, right? And I stayed at his house. He invited me to stay at his house during the Dallas Pop Festival.
That's a really smart guy too.
Oh,
He
incredible.
was brilliant.
Yeah.
He was really
the whole thing he did, he was the first one up in Bearsville with Albert Grossman.
No, but he really was super smart. There were, I mean, there are so many musicians that also had a great identity because of the way they dressed. I think.
And you dressed most of them too.
What was fascinating was I was in at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame not by choice or decision, but I was in the city and somebody said, "Why don't you go to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?" And I thought, "Oh, I don't know. I don't know if I want to walk around." And then I started to see my clothes everywhere. I was like,
I know.
"This is really cool.
No kidding.
This is really great." Did
you
you
know,
ever?
Norma, I can't wait till the Met does their whole exhibit on Norma Kamali.
Oh, please.
No, seriously.
No, there is no exhibit because I let go of every sample I've ever done. I didn't keep anything. I don't believe in that. I don't think doing retrospectives or
But
any
I'm
of
sure
that.
people collected it.
Well, I hope they don't.
I just saw this orange jumpsuit when I was at a vintage at this city last weekend. It was your jumpsuit, an orange parachute suit.
They're all over.
What year was that? Was 82 or something?
Probably.
Yeah, it was an orange jumpsuit. Parachute.
It might have also the orange was after the whiz, but the whiz was the all of the red, green, and
that was
white.
beautiful.
Yeah, that was really incredible. But the performers that had personal style, right? Think about who do you think who like comes to mind. I met Jimi Hendrix in London, and there was a club that all the musicians went to, and fortunately, there was a set of circumstances of meeting the Spencer Davis group in Paris. They invited me to go, and I kept going every time I went to London, and just sitting and talking to this amazing guy who's just like the guitar of a lifetime, and he was just so intuitive with his music, but also he had style. Like he never dressed the same twice. No. He dressed with just pure spirit, color, feeling in every way, just the way he played his guitar. And
spiritual vibe.
He really, really was extraordinary. And I think that there are people like that are just, it's all connected, right? It's all part of the way they create. And who else that you can think of that had this really, talk about original style. There's quite a few.
Yeah, well, getting back to Jimi Hendrix, the first, there was this club in New York in the late 60s, maybe 70, and we used to flip between, it was called Nobody's. It was on Bleecker Street.
Yeah.
It was a rock and roll club, and it was before Electric Lady.
Right.
And Hendrix and everybody would hang out there, the Knack.
Yeah.
Everybody would hang out there, though, but everybody, Jimmy Page, everybody.
Yeah.
But I remember meeting Hendrix because I lived in the Village, and I remember meeting Hendrix one morning, early in the morning, right? It was like, I don't know, I was just coming home from a club. It was like 6:30, and I met Hendrix on 12th Street and 6th Avenue. I don't know if it's Al Cooper's apartment, but they were coming out of an apartment. Him and Mick Jagger were coming out of an apartment, and that's when I met Hendrix. But it's like Mike Quashie had the Hendrix, the Jimmy room. It was called the Jimmy room, and Jimmy used to stay with Mike Quashie on Bedford Street, and the Jimmy room was full of all Mike. When Jimmy went to London, he had all his a lot of clothes there in Mike Quashie's room.
Yeah.
And Mike Quashie had 3 Jimi Hendrix guitars.
My God.
Yeah, he had,
I
unfortunately, had to sell them because of his heart condition.
Yeah. Wow. That is.
But the last time I saw Hendrix was I saw him at Woodstock. I was there the Monday morning he played because I worked there. Mm-hmm. And then the last time I saw him before he went to London was at Randall's Island he played.
Yeah, he was just amazing.
But there's a lot of people like rock and roll people. I mean, Sly and the Family Stone, Sly
I made
Stone.
feather jackets for Sly.
Yes, Sly.
I made colorful feather jackets. He had every color.
Yes.
This is when I had my basement store, and I would make these jackets, and then I would sew big, ostrich boa. I would take the boas and stitch them down, and he would look like a bird.
Yes,
and then he wanted every color. But he was talk about, energy, style, talent, so original. Yeah. It was really
Bootsy Collins.
Yes. I also think people like some of the sort of like Jeff Beck to me. Jeff Beck I met in London also. And I just thought he was such a great guy. He would stay at my friend's house. I would stay there too. And his guitar was he could just play anything. It was like it was part of his body. He was just magic. And his whole thing was sort of reverse fashion. It was very simple. He was just jeans, a t-shirt. He had already gone into that zone. And then when he played, his arms were more a part of what was happening. You know what I mean? It was very interesting. But there's this talent that is universal for people like that. Everything about them is just
and also the women. Look at Debbie Harry.
Yeah.
Her style. She could take something and just make
Yeah.
A trash bag.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or BB Buell.
That's right. That's right.
BB Buell, come on. With Todd Rundgren.
Yes. They were quite the couple.
Or like Sorinda Fox.
Yeah. Yes.
These are the girls, know. I know Pamela DeBarge and like everyone else on the East Coast, But, incredible, Just see, that's when you mentioned before about the age with the Peppermint Lounge.
Yeah.
People were allowed to get into concerts at 14.
Yeah.
14 years old, they were seeing the Dolls.
They weren't exactly allowed.
No, they weren't allowed.
But they weren't, it wasn't sort of as tough.
Right.
It was, it just was a freer time.
Yeah.
It didn't kind of get in the way of anything. It didn't cause a commotion. I do wonder how I survived because there were some crazy places and I don't know how, and I've never taken a drug. I don't drink, and I don't know how I survived just getting through all of that on blind, this is the coolest thing, and I'm having fun, right?
Yeah, and some of those places were very dangerous. There was no exits.
No
fire. If there was a fire, forget it.
No,
I remember sometimes when the cops raided it, and there was only one way out, and you had to go between the legs.
Yeah, no,
it was crazy, right?
No, it was really.
Look at those Arthur Weinstein places like the Continental, the Jefferson.
Totally.
Early Limelight. like early limelight, you know, I mean, crazy places.
Rough and
the
rough.
Milk Bar,
Yep.
you know, like all these crazy places
Yeah.
opened up. Then, of course, you had, you know, Area TR4, the Mud Club, you know, like all these places,
Yeah.
you know, nuts, you know.
You know, it's an interesting, you talk about the clubs, and it's such an interesting kind of sequence of events that happened in New York. I think the clubs really became important when the city just brought everybody here, and anybody who was uncomfortable in their town or their city because they felt different from everybody else, or they were questioning their own identity and whatever. And then they came to New York and could be free to just be. And that, I think, opened up the clubs, because there you could just express yourself. You could dance, you could be whoever you wanted to be, and nobody would even think twice. And so it's just the energy of having this free spirit, whether, you know, it's a feminist who's finding her way in New York, or someone who just was keeping these secrets in their town and came to New York and said, I'm here. This is it. This is where I belong. And the clubs just burst with energy. And it was this energy to just express yourself and be who you are, be your authentic self. Yeah. And I think you could probably trace that if you go through all the clubs, through
oh, yeah. I mean, you hit that word right on the head. The dance.
Yeah.
Dance was therapeutic. People not only dancing, but people watching dance.
Yeah.
It was therapeutic.
Yeah.
It was spiritual.
Yeah.
People would just let out their, you know, let out the jams, you know, and just like be themselves. It was amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, amazing. And I'm not just talking about studio. I'm talking about like,
everybody,
you know, wherever it was Paradise Garage or the Saint or wherever it was, you know, wherever.
And dancing until like till the morning, till the sun came up. And then tea dances on Sundays.
Yeah, the tea dances,
right.
Which started at 2 o'clock.
Right.
At 2 o'clock, the tea dances, the Crystal Palace, all those places, you know.
So
the tea dances were great on Sundays.
Fun. And so you could just dance all the time. And if I think about it, I think of all the years I was just like dancing. And it wasn't about going to the gym. It was about going to the club and to dance, or even a tea dance, or wherever you were, you could dance. I mean, people, if somebody was playing guitar, you get up and dance. It would just be what you did.
And you dance with anybody you didn't know. Everybody was one big dance floor.
Over there. I'm going to come over and dance with you.
You just dance. And then all of a sudden you turn around and like, you know, okay, I love you.
So it's very funny. I remember there was a guy who I knew from the clubs and dancing, and he was a great guy. And he said, I'm going to be playing records at this club. It's the new club that opened, and they want to have music, and every place had live music and this disc music. But this was the first small club in New York, very early, to have just records. And he was going to be the DJ, but it didn't even have the word DJ then. And he was a great guy. And I thought, oh, he knows good music. And he said, come and dance. And they have dance contests and you can win money. And I needed money for art supplies. I said, I'll be there. And so I go and I see him, and he's in this kind of booth in the middle of you walk in, it's a long place, and he's there, and the booth is lit up and he's playing records. So he said, you want to make some money? See that guy over there? I know the two of you are going to really dance and win some money. You can win $500 each. I said, okay, bring him on. Eddie Kamali.
You're kidding me.
I'm not kidding.
Oh my God.
Swear.
Eddie Kamali?
That's how
Wow,
that's
magic.
how I met Eddie
Magic.
Kamali.
Magic.
and we won the dance
Wow.
contest. Yeah. So and
That's
then
a story. Wow, that's amazing. That's golden.
But
golden.
that was sort of the beginning of, dance contests were very popular. And to get people to go to this club, obviously they came up with that idea. And that was the very first club where they just had records and somebody playing the records with a dance floor. That was wasn't a jukebox. It was like an on-purpose thing. And so I thought, oh my God, this is a good idea. Mm-hmm. But the bands were fun to dance to. I mean, the bands, the energy that bands had.
I remember like in 1970, upstairs in Max's Kansas City. This is unbelievable. I mean, it never happened today. Maybe it would, I don't know. But I remember in 1970, the Velvet Underground did a residency in 1970 in August, right? 2 shows a night. And less than 30, maybe 30 people showed up. And they didn't show up to sit in their chair. Yeah. They showed up to dance to the live Velvet Underground right next to Lou Reed playing heroin and Sweet Jane and stuff, unbelievable. Yeah. 2, improvised, 2 sets a night for almost 3 weeks. Can you believe it? No. I went every night. Yeah. It was outrageous, to sit, to dance. And then after they would take a break and have a beer with Lou. Yeah. Unbelievable,
Yeah. So I remember going to a club, a small club, and it had a stage, and there was a singer comedian, and she was hysterically funny, and we were all dressed up from the shop. We're all dressed. There's a whole bunch of us at the tables, and so she's funny and she's singing. And then she stops in her act and she said, all right, where did you get these clothes? And that was Bette Midler.
You're kidding me.
And so
that wasn't at Reno Sweeney's, was it?
No, way before.
Continental?
Wait. This was a club. It was around the same time as the Continental Bats, but this was a small club that she was doing a thing in. And she had no money.
And she would do that. That's exactly what she did.
No, totally. And
that's Bette Midler.
And she had these raggedy things that she was wearing. She said, I need clothes. She said, I'll work in the shop. I'll do whatever. And so I said, you know what I want you to do? I'm going to do my first fashion show. And it's in this glamorous house that somebody is saying we could borrow. And they have a piano. I said, I'd like you to just sit on the piano and take a microphone and say whatever you want. And remember, I don't know if you remember this at the time, models would walk with a number to identify the style.
Exactly. Of course.
Bill Cunningham was there, of course.
Yeah, of course.
And so Bette sat on the piano and said crazy stuff. I mean, I said, say whatever you want.
Oh my
God. And so, and I'm showing clothes like skinny stretch pants made out of circus fabric. Nobody had ever seen skinny pants like that. Nobody was wearing that. And so people looked at me like I had lost my mind. They didn't know who this woman was that was saying this crazy stuff on the microphone. And Bill Cunningham came up to me and he said, girlie, you're doing a good thing here.
Bill.
You don't worry about them. You're fine. You're just doing fine. And everybody else was like, this is crazy. She's too nuts. And he was just, this is going to be okay. And so Bette, she said, I hope I said, it was exactly what I wanted. I wanted you to just be you, say whatever you want about the clothes. And I wanted it just to be that way. And it was just, nobody knew what the hell was going on. It was like, this is too crazy. But she was such an original too.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, she was really Totally, yeah.
I saw her at Reno's Intercontinental. Yeah, I remember it. You don't remember Reno Sweeney's on 13th Street?
Yeah.
That was an
That was a
amazing
little
cabaret.
later. Yeah, that was a great. That was really.
Everybody played there.
Yeah.
You know, Manhattan Transfer. Remember Manhattan Transfer?
Oh my God.
Oh my God!
Right.
Some of those bands, some of those groups, and also Trudy Hellers.
Yes.
Trudy Hellers.
Oh
great,
my God,
you know?
That's right.
Remember Trudy Hellers?
Oh my God.
I remember seeing with Andy. I remember going to Andy, and he goes, "Let's go to Trudy." We went to Trudy's. You know where we see it? We saw Blossom Dairy.
Yes.
Blossom Dairy. And Andy and I are sitting there. It's like watching paint dry. Get nothing wrong with Blossom Dairy.
So Andy used to come to the store with his Polaroid camera.
Oh my God.
And just walk around and take pictures of everything. And now, through the years, these pictures are showing up and they're being auctioned.
Yeah.
And so I'm seeing these pictures being auctioned up when he would come in and take pictures of the mannequins and take pictures.
Yeah.
It came from.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. He was, talk about that was his art. His art was.
The moment.
Him.
Yeah.
He was his art.
Yeah.
It was really.
It was always the moment.
Yeah. It totally was.
Yeah.
It wasn't the 15 minutes of fame. It was the moment for his time in total lifetime.
Yeah. I mean, if I could tell you just a couple short stories, Andy, that I remember.
Right.
Like in the early days, you probably heard some of it, but in the early days in 70, 69, the early days, the superstars like Candy and Holly and Jackie and Taylor, they didn't want paintings. They wanted money, cash.
Yeah.
And so Holly would say, after doing a movie, Jackie and Holly would say, I want $100. And Andy said, no, I'm broke. Take a painting, right? Which is $40 million, right? But they wanted $100. So anyway, so Taylor did a movie called Lonesome Cowboys with Eric Emerson and Diva, right?
Yes.
And it was a road trip movie to LA, right? And so Andy, when they came back, Andy paid Taylor in paintings. He gave him the 4 Mick Jagger lip paintings signed, right?
Oh my God.
So it was shot in 68, 69, it came out. But in 71, Taylor, I'm in the summer, where I'm in the Village, and I see Taylor walking toward me, right? And he's waving a $100 bill. And I said, Taylor, because Taylor and I were friends for years. Every day we hung out and did movies, And anyway, I said, Taylor, where'd you get the 100? This is 1971, 72 maybe. And he goes, I just sold my 4 Jaggers to the poster man. Remember the poster man?
No.
Yes. He said, let's go to the Ninth Circle for drinks and steaks. And we blew it all in 20 minutes. But that's how it was then. People, when Jackie Curtis did Vain Victory in 1971, Andy donated a cow painting, which I showed you, right?
Yes.
And that painting, and everybody was in Vain Victory. Right. Dean, Candy, Holly, everybody. But anyway, people trashed that cow painting. They trashed the original Warhol.
So, I know.
That's how it was.
Yeah.
When I went to in 1980, they had you remember this, they had an art show up in Times Square. A big art show. It was like 3 floors or something. And Kenny Scharf and, Keith Haring, Besky, Ronnie Control and everybody, right? And they were all showing these paintings, right? So I remember one of the last nights or the last night going there and someone yelling out saying, any painting off the wall is $500 or less. And do you know what? Nobody took a painting. Because you know why? Because everybody was going to the after hours clubs and no one wanted to carry it. Can you believe it?
Of course. I have to say it's because I think for the kind of not thinking of the value so much, I think was because everything was so new.
Yeah,
and when people are in your lifetime, you don't really appreciate the long-term value of that person. Right. So when you look back and you think about people, and you wonder, well, this person is so talented, but in your lifetime, you don't think, how are people going to look back, or what, like Andy Warhol, or just I mean, it's a fascinating comment on human nature in a different set of circumstances than today.
Right.
It's tough today. It's tough for kids. It's tough for families.
Yeah.
It's tough. It's tough. And it's tough to come to New York to try to invent yourself at this time. So there's a tremendous amount of bravery for people who do, and tremendous amount of respect should be paid for people who really think out of the box, do things that other people aren't doing, invent things, create things.
Authentic.
Yeah, and doing it when it's not as easy as it was then. It really, if we're really fair about this, it was easy to just about do anything. Not that we wouldn't starve, or I can't tell you the amount of times I cried myself to sleep thinking I wouldn't be in business the next day. I mean, it was just that, okay, I made it another day. That's good. We've all gone through that, but it really was easier. The pressure to survive was different because you could always sleep on somebody's couch. There was always somebody, nothing was that precious. Everybody was, come on, just here it is. Here, I have clothes, take these or whatever. It was never, or come, let's eat, I have food. Well, everybody just did it because there's no other way. That's the way you did it. Now it's harder.
Yeah. And also, adding to what you just shared in my book is the fact that during that time, people weren't obsessed with celebrityism. So Andy Warhol wasn't a celebrity.
No.
He was respected somewhat, but not by the Hollywood.
No.
But he wasn't respected in the art world, but he wasn't and so there's a lot of, there's something to say to hang around with people that you think are celebrities, but they're real people. You know what I mean? Like Iggy Pop is Jim.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? He's Iggy Pop on stage. Do you know what I mean? So like the thing is, like then it was different. Like hanging around with Andy Warhol. Like Andy used to say to me, Dustin, go in the back and take a painting. I never took it. And even Gerard, who I'm seeing on Friday, Gerard Malenga, one of my best friends, Gerardo worked with Andy, did all the silk screens, all the car crashes, everything, the electric chair, the cows, the flowers, everything. He never took his painting.
Yeah.
Not one.
Yeah. That's crazy. It is crazy.
I said, Gerard, come on, you got those silk screens somewhere. No.
Well, it's possessions aren't everything. The experience is so much more. You can't take it with you, that's for sure. But the experience is so much more that stays with you.
I'm really grateful and blessed for the experiences I had with my friends, I mean, I have stuff. I mean, one little story, I know this sounds ridiculous, but I remember in the early 70s, so going, Salvador Dali lived in St. Regis.
Yeah.
And he used to go to every night to have his tropical drink in the King Cole room. And he used to love, not sex-wise, he used to love two girls to come up, sit next to him at the banquet at the table, and I would sit across from him. I'd bring the two girls and sit across from him, right? I know this sounds weird, but it's the truth. And Salvador Dali would, we'd order drinks, free drinks, and we, every so often, more than often, we'd run to the bathroom and do coke. And so we'd come out and our nose would be dripping, and Salvador Dali would be talking to us at the table. And he would be drawing these illustrations and signing them.
Oh my God.
And the cocktail napkins, the St. Regis King Cole cocktail. And we would take the napkins and blow our nose with them.
No. No.
About 80 of them.
No. Anyway.
I know that sounds crazy.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good one. Anyway, to tie this up, I'm going to tell everybody that this book is a real treasure.
Thanks, Norma.
And it's not just the stories and the photos, but it's really the essence of Dustin. And I'm sure you'll see him around. If you are around, you'll see Dustin. So come up and say hi to Dustin. And Dustin, I love you.
I love you too.
I'm so happy that we have history together. It is such a joy to know that we do. We have stories and we have history.
We have so
and
many
we
times.
laugh
Yes.
a lot.
Yes. And it's an honor being here. Thank you for having me,
Give me
Norma.
a
I
hug.
love you.
I love you.
I love you so much.
Hey, press follow and leave a comment after you listen to the podcast. Thanks.